Good morning, everyone. This is Steve. Welcome to this edition of Monday Morning Music. We are talking about some of the myths, misunderstandings, and misrepresentations of organic and house church practices and beliefs. We're going to talk about the term ekklesia today. There's a man. I hear that. I heard that all the ekklesia this, ekklesia that. We don't want church. We want ekklesia, ekklesia, and they make a big deal out of a word definition on ekklesia. So we're gonna talk about that. First of all, ecclesia does not mean somebody's house. It simply means an assembly of any kind. But there was a factor associated with the word ecclesia that I'm going to give you at the end of this episode. The reason why I believe the church, the authors of the Gospels and the Epistles used that word, because there are 21 other words that could have been used that were common words for a building or a home or a house or a guild hall or a trade hall, or 21 other words. And specifically, ecclesia in the Pauline letters is only used 4 times. Twice in reference to Priscilla and Aquila, who were tradespeople, who were working with their hands, whose likelihood they were living above the shop. We talked about that. The majority of the non-elites in the society lived in the same place they worked, so either upstairs or in a back room. And if you were a tanner or a butcher, I can tell you what, that back room or that upper room wouldn't have been very pleasant. It's most likely would have been a back room. So the fact that there was 21 other words, why pick ecclesia? Now, in the 3rd century, we do have evidence of more wealthy homes, the ones recently been found with a Christian inscription on the floor, which is pretty significant archaeologically, from about the 200 AD, where a quote-unquote home has been adapted by taking out a wall, adding a larger triclinium, the U-shaped sofa, that could maybe accommodate 65 people. Maybe. The reason people make a big deal out of ecclesia is because it's the same word that was used for like an assembly for civic governance. And that has been hijacked by the Christian dominionists to mean that, the reason, God uses the word ecclesia is because, we're supposed to be the governing this or that. We have I'm sure some of you have heard this about ecclesia, Athens, the cities in Athens, the governing body was called the ecclesia, so the church is called to governing authority. Yeah, governing over who? Themselves, and that's what they don't teach. Christian dominionists think the ecclesia exists to take over the world. Because here's one of the unique inferences or implications of the word ecclesia. Ekklesia was a place where mania, craziness, would be restrained, internal conflict would be restrained, and public shaming would be restrained. Ekklesia has to do with self-governance, not world domination in Christian nationalism or Christian dominionism. That's not what the church is called to. That is a misapplication of the word ecclesia. Because in their world, Christianity was just another one of the cults. And people coming from the cults were coming into Christianity, bringing their cultic beliefs with them, and the apostles had to subdue that. No, you can't have a sex orgy. You can't be drunk. So ecclesia was a place where craziness was restrained. Do you know how many home meetings I've been in that have been full on out of here? Crazy. Charismatic lunacy. Unfortunately, I was responsible for some of them. because that's where I was at. So the other thing that an ecclesia is for is to restrain internal conflict. Home churches are no better than institutional churches when it comes to internal or ruling governmental conflict. And ecclesia was a place to inhibit public shaming. Otherwise, to not, we've talked about honor and shame and how important it was in their world. So to not bring shame to someone who might be under discipline or doing things that they shouldn't do. Behavior in some of like the Dionysian and Bacchanalian cults were shameful. They were actually later on, I can't remember which emperor was at the time, but they were actually made illegal because even for Roman sensibilities, that what went on in their meetings was shameful. So an ecclesia is a distinct meeting where we are not going to engage in shameful behavior. So that's why they chose the word ecclesia. It's got nothing to do about the 7 mountains or taking my city or taking my country for Jesus. It's got nothing to do with that. It's about self-governance. Another place where the early church met that this really is difficult for Protestants. They met in the tombs with their dead ancestors. We have proof positive tombs have been discovered with Christian symbols and adapted with the triclinium so that you can have a meal. They ate their meals there together. And I've taught in other episodes and other video series here on the YouTube channel the importance of a meal. A meal is where the social bonds were renewed. It's in the series on the Eucharist. I'm not going to rehash that. But for them to have a meal was not just sharing a sandwich. It was a reinforcement of social values. It was a reinforcement of the bond with one another. It was a reinforcement of the obligation to one another. And they ate in the tombs. There were 3 meetings, and I covered this in the Eucharist teaching also. Go to the playlist library and find it if you want more. 3 meals. They had the agape love feast, they had the Eucharist, and they had the refrigerium. The refrigerium was the meal that they ate in the tombs. Because remember how important to remember the ancestors are? Do you think that that just disappeared when they became, that custom disappeared when they became Christians? No, it was even more significant because they believed those people hadn't died. They exist. Those people have passed, so their remains are here, but they are in another place alive. And we inherit together, right? There's a great cloud of witnesses. There's an active company watching us. So they would actually meet in the tombs, not in a home. How, try sharing that at a homegrown meeting. Oh, we want to be biblical. We want to be New Testament. We want to be first century. So let's go to the cemetery. How popular do you think that would be? Not very. So, if we want to start throwing the term ecclesia around, let's get that First Amendment politicized, Western, democratized nonsense out of our head. And let's try to get back into the world that they were actually in and understand it the way they actually did. See you the next time.